Hello and welcome back to She's At It Again. Today, my name's Tanya, and today I want to help you learn how to make sauerkraut. If you're not a fan of sauerkraut, I would encourage you to revisit that idea, only because it's so good for your gut. It's just a really, really healthy food. I have a big head of cabbage right here. I have organic cabbage, and I have salt that I have weighed out, and that's it. That's all the ingredients. So we're not going to mess with a whole lot of ingredients. You don't need to go run to the store and buy extra things for this, but it is such a neat process. I remember as a young adult going to Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri, and it was during the fall, and they were doing just the funnest stuff. They had it decorated so beautifully, but there were some ladies dressed in period clothing, and they were sitting in this little area protected from the rain, and we were not. It was so cold, but they were taking these, it looked like a baseball bat in a big tall jar, and just hitting it. And I stood there for the longest thinking, what are they doing? I thought at first they were making butter, but it wasn't butter. They were making sauerkraut. And I remember for years kind of pondering back and looking at that going, I wish I'd have asked more questions or stood and watched it a little bit longer, because I had no idea what they were doing. But then when I figured out it was sauerkraut, I thought, wonder why they were hitting it like that. I couldn't figure it out. So anyway, I, like you, probably a lot of you, go to YouTube to, get all my education. But knowing why they did it, it just made so much sense. But again, I wish I'd have stayed around and watched it a little bit longer. But this may not be the way it's supposed to be done, but we'll say this is the way Tanya does it. And it turns out great. We love it. We eat it in a lot of stuff. You can eat it alone. You can eat it with things, on top of things. But if you're a lover of sauerkraut, this will kind of change your idea about how things are made, or just enlighten you on how things are made. This does not have to be pressure cooked. It does not have to be canned. It is stored in a jar on the shelf in your pantry as is, and it's going to produce that fermentation and just get nice and tart, and it's just a really neat thing. So I'm going to chop up this cabbage real quick. Well, actually not real quick. I'm going to get my mandolin out and shred it up to where it's real thin, and then I'm going to bring you back in the process of putting the salt on it and getting all that mixed up, and I'll explain to you about the ratio of salt to cabbage and all that, and let you in on the middle of the process. So we'll be back. Okay, welcome back to Sauerkraut 101. I used my mandolin, sort of, but did a lot of chopping with the knife. It's just random pieces, but you can tell there's bigger pieces like this in here, and then there's teeny tiny little shreds. Sometimes the mandolin does a really good job if the cabbage is tight, but this one's kind of loose. I wanted to let you know about the ratio of cabbage to salt. What you're going to do is weigh your cabbage out. Now keep in mind you have the weight of the bowl as well, and you don't want to figure that in, but weigh just your cabbage. So if you have to take it out and put it in a big bag or something like that that doesn't weigh anything, or if you just want to weigh your bowl, then tear it out and add your T-A-R-E it out, and then add your cabbage to it. Weigh your cabbage, and what you're going to do is get that in grams and then multiply your grams by 0.02, because you want about a 2 to 2.5% salt ratio to your cabbage. So right here, just a rough measurement here, I have about 1868 grams, which is 1.869 kilograms. So about 1,800, let's say 1,870 grams. So I needed this much salt, which is around, I think I measured out 37 grams, 38. So that looks like quite a bit of salt for that, but it's just going to work beautifully. Just a little note about these scales. This is just a little cheapy scale from my local store, but it works so great because I do a lot of sourdough bread and things like that that have to be weighed in grams. So I keep that in its package in the box in this drawer here with a lot of my baking things, my rolling pins and things. But I keep the battery outside of it. And the reason is because sometimes accidentally that thing gets turned on, somebody bumps it or whatever, and it gets turned on, it runs my battery down. So I keep the battery out of it. I just put the battery in every time I use it. Just a FYI on saving your battery. Okay, next step in this, all we're gonna do is take this salt, sprinkle around in this, and at this point, you can cover it with a towel and just walk off. That salt is gonna start drawing out the moisture in this. What I'm gonna do is get one of my big spoons or ladle or something over there. I'm gonna show you my spoon. This is a spoon that a friend of mine made, and this is, I think he said it's Bodark Antique, but it's got that little stripe in the center. Isn't that so cool? His real job is not a woodworker, but that's what he likes to do. He does this, he does all kinds of stuff in his man caves and his man areas, but he has a measly job as a doctor during the day, but this is what he does in his spare time, and he's so good at it. So what I'm going to do is take this spoon because it has a rounded end, and this is what you're going to do. So just find you a good YouTube video, maybe one of ours that came out earlier, and just sit there and hit on the cabbage. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it gets those juices coming out of that cabbage. So you're going to do this for a while, and when it looks kind of juicy, and we'll come back in a minute and I'll show you what mine looks like, but if you don't even want to do this part, you can avoid this part altogether. It's not a necessity. It's just a matter of, I think, back in the olden days, they just needed something to do, maybe, because it looks like they didn't have enough to do out with killing their own chickens for lunch or something like that, with all the 12 kids running around the house. But you're going to take and just chop this up. You'll see when it starts getting kind of wet, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you what we're going to do next to this, because we're going to start packing it in jars, and you're just not going to believe how tight this goes in a jar and how much you can actually put in a jar. But to top it off, it's something interesting, so I just kind of want to show you this little thing that I invented to put on top of it. But they have different ways to seal the top. What you want to do is make sure all of your cabbage is underneath the surface of the liquid so the bacteria doesn't get into it. But that's the key part to keeping it from molding on the top. So anyway, we'll come back in a bit and I'll show you that step. We are continuing our sauerkraut endeavor here. You can see how wet this sauerkraut is now. I'm hoping I'm getting a good shot of that. Let me see. Yeah. See, it just looks mushy. It has gone down considerably. I was just standing there watching a video and hitting it with this spoon. This spoon is fabulous. It is hard as a rock. I'm not even kidding. But it really makes quite a bit of juice in the bottom, if you can see that. I'm not sure that you can, but I'm hoping you can. So we have a jar, a big jar like this. The wider the mouth, the easier it is to fill things in, but the harder it is to seal it to where the sauerkraut stays under the juice. So we kind of got one with sort of a big neck, but it's not straight up. So we're going to take our sauerkraut and just start packing it in there. As I knock it out of the bowl. Urgh. If you just decide not to bang on it with a spoon, I'm not even sure what that's called. Maybe a muddler, I'm not sure. If you decide not to hit on the on the cabbage with the spoon and just put the salt on it, cover it up, and walk off, it's going to take a while. Now you can take your hands. I mean, a lot of people just take their hands and mush at it, but that salt just really burns my hands. I think I have so many cuts and stuff in my hand, particularly in the cold weather like this. My hands are so dry, and all those little cuts in my skin, that salt would not feel very good. So I'm going to take the handle and start pressing this down. Got it on both ends, so it's just going to come off onto the countertop no matter what. Sometimes your hands are the best way to press it down in the jar, though, that's for sure. You want to get all the air bubbles out. Look how much juice that is making in there. And there is no water in this. Now keep in mind, I did not wash this cabbage off. Normally I let my vegetables sit in vinegar water, salt water, soapy water for 24 hours. But with cabbage, that's different, especially with this. It helps with the fermentation somehow. I don't know how that bacteria works. I'm not a scientist, so don't get me going there. But I just know that they recommend, from what I've read, not to wash your cabbage off. Now you can take off the outer leaves that look like they might have some dirt and stuff on them just from sitting on the ground, or some of the leaves that look older and have kind of a crusty edge to them. But yeah, I would hesitate to wash it at all, because you don't want to add a lot of water to it. Also, you might want to save one of your outside leaves if you want to use that as the barrier above your sauerkraut. Right here, I'm going to show you what little gadget I use in just a minute. But some people just use the cabbage leaf on top. You can fold it up and make sure all the cabbage is below the liquid line, and put that leaf on top of it to seal it. And you can take like stones or some kind of heavy weights or something. A lot of people will find river rocks and wash them, and I would highly suggest putting them in the oven through several cycles of baking things just to kill off anything that might be in it. And they use that to weight down the cabbage leaves or whatever cover they have on this to keep it below the water line. Okay, that is a lot of cabbage packed in that jar. I don't see any air bubbles left in there. and I am pushing down on it. And it's got a lot of moisture on the top. So here's what I've done. I took the side of a plastic milk jug, so I know it's food safe, and I cut a circle that is bigger than the circumference of the jar, just by a little bit. I took a sharp object and poked holes in it, and then I cut a slit to the center. I'm hoping this is getting in there. So you can see that I cut a slit in it. So I can take this and shape it like a funnel, push it down in here. Make sure all your cabbage is below the water line, or the juice line. Put it like that and push it down. And when my lid goes on, I could take something and put in between this and the lid, but I'll keep checking this in the pantry, and as long as I don't have anything floating up above that, then it should be fine. This is how I fermented my last jar of sauerkraut, and it turned out just fine. But isn't that beautiful? Now, in a few days, you're going to notice this cabbage is not going to be green any longer, but rather it's going to be kind of a golden color, and that's fine. That's what sauerkraut does, is it changes colors. It's not going to stay pretty and green like cabbage forever. But that's how you make sauerkraut. I would say check this every few days. If you need to take and burp it by just taking the lid off a little bit, putting it back on, that might be a good idea. Check it every couple of days. But I would say leave that in there for about 4 weeks, and you should have a lovely sauerkraut. If you leave it in there for 10 months and forget about it, it's not going to go bad. It's sauerkraut. It's good. It's good, folks. It's just supposed to be that way. So anyway, thanks for joining us. I hope you learned something. I hope it encouraged you to try to make sauerkraut. And if you have a head of cabbage and some lettuce and something to figure out your measurements with, then go for it. I would encourage you to get your kids involved if you have kids at home or grandkids. They love doing stuff like this. Chopping is just the funnest thing ever to kids, but just to sit and mush it with your hands, or even take a spoon or something like I did and hit on it, kids are going to love this. Take them out and just give them a big plastic tablecloth and say, hey, have at it. Just beat the fire out of this stuff. So anyway, enjoy this, and we'll hope to see you on the next video. Thanks. Okay, I wanted you to see what these look like. Get out your masking tape and label your jars. Here's the date, of course, January the 24th of 2022. O is for organic, and sauerkraut. Just write it however you can read it on there. There you go. And these should be ready in about a month. I had to put a lid on that one, or a plastic lid inside it to hold that little plastic cone down. So get them labeled so you'll know when they're ready. They should be ready in about a month.